Today will be the first day that we play the second episode, but it's going to be called episode 1 for Star Trek Adventures First Response. I'm pretty excited about this episode. It's going to try to show some of the range of the original series episodes that we're drawing from. We talked about and our list of select episodes to capture the theme of the original series that we like included a lot of episodes that deal with the frontier, that deal with ancient civilizations and things like that. But one of the things that was brought out by the players as we were talking about how to put everything together from the character perspective and how to choose a duty assignment for the ship that was interesting for everybody was the notion of more diplomatic missions. So there's an interest in combat, and there's an interest in problem solving, and like in the pilot, and there's an interest in other right, dealing with the messes left behind by the ships that move on, was how Ron put it, I think. So the notion of returning to places that we saw in the original series and seeing how they are now. This was listed as a fairly low priority, so it is not just drawing on stuff out of specific episodes, but anyway, it's there as an element. So what came to mind was, what are situations that were left, ambiguous enough to be interesting to think about, and can have enough room for interpretation that what I throw into the mix can inspire the players to think thoughts and to come to conclusions and engage in dialogue, so that when they are doing mechanical things like obtaining information, when they're debating with NPCs and trying to establish relationships, when they're doing the things that Starfleet officers do, and they get more information, or they get greater context, or they become aware of different perspectives, things can matter, right? That there's room for interpretation, and there's room for those interpretations to change. That's what interests me about a lot of play in a role-playing game. And in this particular role-playing game, Star Trek seems to be particularly suited for that sort of play. So what are some episodes that I might be able to draw on to get up front near the beginning of the campaign? If I draw on some elements from a specific episode, this would be the way that I do it. Right. So we're still in the getting to know you phase of play. So I want to do things that maybe had a lower priority or had some hesitation attached to them, like, yeah, that might be okay, right? Get them out up front, see if we have fun doing them so that we can not worry about them, kind of thing. So the episode I chose was about Elan of Troyes, right? And if you're not familiar with the episode, this is a third season episode based loosely on the taming of the shrew, where we have a diplomatic mission between two planets in the same system who simply don't get along. And in order to improve relations, to end war and this sort of stuff, the daughter of one world is going to marry the son of another world, and that sort of thing. So Elan of Troyes is going to marry the king of Elan of Elas is going to marry the king of Troyes and become Elan of Troyes. She has to make some interesting sacrifices for the good of her people. What is the king giving up? The story's not about that. We don't even learn his name in the episode. So I have given the king a name for this episode, and my preparation, I thought I would print it out so I can be like super clear. This is my preparation. And maybe I'll put it up on the screen as an image beside me. But um, what is the mission? They're going to a starbase, and they're redirected to the star system that holds Elas and Troyes, which I had the name, so I'm naming it the Helena star system because of the obvious allusions to Troy and all that stuff. So the Helena star system, uh, and I had an idea of how these planets relate to each other, and I had an idea about how they became mixed up with groups like the Federations and the Klingon Empire and so on and so forth. That's not in my prep. That's just understanding, right? So if it becomes relevant, if they do research, if they uh, dig into some of this stuff, right? If they dig into some of the background is the word I'm fumbling for. If they dig into some of the background of the solar system, I can riff off of logically how these species became entangled with the politics of the galaxy at large, and the Federation and the Klingon Empire in particular. And I'm going to advance it a number of years. Right? Although this is a third season episode, there is conflict with the Klingons in this episode, so we're kind of assuming that it takes place prior to the Organian peace, and so it's a number of years ago in the past. So the situation between Elas and Troyes has to have changed, and their ties to the Federation have strengthened, and so there are changes to technology, and there's changes to how interplanetary travel works within the system, and so on and so forth. So once I thought about those changes, what would happen 3 to 5 years after Kirk drops Elan off on Troyes? What would happen? So I started thinking along those lines just for fun, and then I thought, all right, well, that's not an episode, that's just fun. And then I thought, okay, there's obvious signs of discontent in the culture about, how each side lives. This isn't going to suddenly vanish because of the marriage between these two celebrities. It will be an influence, and it will show trends within the culture, but it won't be the change. Right? So let's assume that there are dissidents on both sides. What are some of the things that they might do? And that's when things fell together. So my preparation is that the Avicenna is going to be redirected to this star system because a ship has gone missing. Right? They're not going to know any of the circumstances as to why. It may not matter, right? They may show up, search for the ship, find it, and that may very well be the end of the episode. Of course, there's going to be other stuff going on. There's things going on internally within the ship, and between characters, and we're going to find out how their reputation has been affected by the events of the pilot. We're going to do that as the opening of play, or at least during the session. So there are many things that are going to be going on as the human and Vulcan drama, I guess is the word we're looking for, of the piece. But the mission is recover the vessel, find the vessel, hopefully before the people on the vessel are dead, but at least find it and answer the mystery of what happened to the ship, Elan's duty. Right? And most of my prep here is details about the ship. So if they wind up doing obtain information about the vessel, I won't have to make it up on the spot. So it has a crew of 20, has a cargo capacity of 20,000 tons. It has a delegation aboard, which includes, and here's where things get weird, the Royal Executioner. That's the official title, with guardsmen and inquisitors. And I've named that executioner. She's Rytok, and she is a female. an Elasian female, which of course means that who knows, maybe some interaction will take place which will bring about the crying and tears and the powerful uh, love effect that that produces, and yeah, who knows. Uh, we've allowed for the possibility. The situation is this ship having the royal executioner aboard is overdue by 3 days when they send out when they start searching for it. They can't find it, so they request aid from the Federation. The Federation redirects the nearest ship, and of course it's the nearest ship, and so the Avicenna redirects itself and shows up after traveling, uh, you know, uh, to assist. And it'll be interesting to see how quickly they choose to go there. Uh, what will be the outcome of the reputation rolls? What will be the relationship between acting Captain Tillich and the Commodore of this particular duty assignment? I'm curious to see um, how the crew will react to the mission assignment. I'm hoping that they will see it as something that they are good at. I mean, they've got a distribution of abilities and skills where this is definitely something that they should be good at. And if we have, like the threat of Klingon involvement, if we have the threat of some other kind of space-based conflict, possibly even with Elas or Troyes or both, then there's lots of things for them to prepare for or to react to. So there's lots of places that this can go depending on what actually happens in play. So I find it fertile field for improvisation. So why has the ship disappeared? Why was the ship dispatched, I think, is the more important question. So here's the situation. According to my notes, the planet Elas is suspicious of Troyan dissidents, and they believe that the Troyan dissidents have scuttled the ship and that everybody's dead. Right? They've jumped to that conclusion, maybe because that's what they would do. Right? And Troyes suspects Elasian dissidents, of course, because they're blameless in all things. And they think that they've captured the ship and are doing it to sow dissent or, to obtain some kind of favor, shift the balance of power, that kind of stuff, because that's what they would do. All right, so the suspicions of each side help us kind of expose and make the characteristics of these different cultures, available for role-playing interaction. Well, the Federation is, of course, going to suspect the Klingons. And I don't know where this will come from. I don't really want to include it in the report. But I do hope that somebody in the crew decides to dig into, past Federation interactions with the star system and learn of the Klingon interest. That will raise the tension. If they simply go there and start looking, there will be tension, right? Because there are lives at stake, but it will feel more like a race against time, or like some kind of submarine chase. If you've got a hunter-killer kind of culture like the Klingons that you think is out there, I think that would be better. So hopefully that will happen. Hopefully they will learn to suspect Klingon involvement. The background. Why did the ship disappear? Is that there were 2 attempts on Elan of Troyes's life, which she survived, but she was killed by a third one, and the king, who I've named Achille, was wounded. So she died, and he was wounded. So in the chaos surrounding this, the royal executioner, who is kind of like the judge and jury all rolled into one, is dispatched from the planet Elas to find out what's going on, right? To be a part of the investigation. And it's her ship, Rytok's ship, which disappears, right? So the official delegation to investigate the assassination of, the co-ruler of this system, has vanished. No suspects have been found. Several groups came forward to claim responsibility, but they have been disproven. So, I'm sowing in lots of confusion and ambiguity for them to get into solving a mystery if they are interested in that. It's not necessary. It can serve simply as background. It can serve to heighten tension. It can serve as color of the scenes and the resulting situations, but it can also be something that they pursue, right? It may end up giving them leads to follow as to how to find the ship or how to prevent further difficulty. I'm going to give them a directive, an additional directive to prevent hostilities. I'm not sure exactly how I will word it, but the idea is that it was important enough to assign the Enterprise here several years ago to serve as a ferry from one place to the next for Elan. So dispatching the Avicenna to find the Royal Executioner is going to come with some overt political requirement, a directive to keep the peace here, because this is a valuable source of dilithium, if you remember the episode. So the ship itself, it's not destroyed. It's adrift, has no power, has minimal life support, and it's not the Klingons. I'm picking on the Orion pirates, and it may be the Klingons, and this will depend on things like threat expenditures and whatnot down the line. But the way that I want to set it up, and I don't know if we'll get there in the first play session or not. It'd be cool if we did. But there's a consortium of Orion criminal types, an Orion criminal enterprise, Orion pirates, let's call them what they are, want to be able to plunder the resources of Elas, because it's still very primitive. They've got enough advantages that they can, get in and like strip mine dilithium as long as the planet is in uproar. So if they can start a little war, they can, maybe even make it easier and just turn it into profiteering rather than having to actually do the physical work themselves. See the idea? So, they set up a little assassination of some backwater ruler and start a little war and have the Federation thinking it's the Klingons because the Klingons have been involved here before trying to start a war. So, then you come in and you start, supplying both sides and selling information to the Klingons, or, who knows what. There's all kinds of opportunities and motives and methodologies for profit. So it's the Orions that are behind it all. And to make it even weirder and make it more likely that they suspect somebody, Romulans or the Klingons, we're going to have the Orions using a stolen cloaking device. All right. And it's not going to work properly, as we have seen with the Enterprise and the Enterprise incident. Right. So intermittently, the ship will be able to vanish, but then it's going to have to reappear again. Okay. So it has boarded and disabled the ship and has tractored it away and is hiding it in the system. So it's not like they're looking for a derelict ship which is in one location and, by searching in a grid pattern, they're going to find it. No, they're going to they're going to have to figure out a way to find it when it's being actively hidden. So that's all I have. That's our inciting incident. The ship has vanished. It's vanished because of, interference by an antagonistic group. And there is a rich political background that makes all of this a possible, powder keg, which could ignite and scuttle not just ships, but also careers and reputations and that sort of stuff. So that's what I have for part A of episode 1. It doesn't have a title yet. It was pretty easy to come up with title for the pilot of The Nature of Threat. I had it from very early on, and it stuck all the way through. I'm not really sure what this one might be, but naming the ship Elan's Duty got me thinking about duty, and it does seem like all the different groups in that I've put into this mix, the diplomats of Troyes and the warriors of Elas, and the people who are caught in between their different conflicting desires, these two cultures, Federation, Klingons, if they end up getting involved in this episode, there are questions of duty in there. So something involving the word duty. Maybe we'll just call it duty, something like that, or questions of duty. I don't know. Anyway, that's what I have, and uh, let's see how many sessions this one runs. Part of me wants to see if we can do it in fewer sessions, because that will suggest tighter framing of scenes on my part. But then, of course, the risk of that is cutting people off from things that they want to do, and not knowing them well enough yet as players to know, that is a risk that has to be considered. That's part of the skill of getting better at being part of a new group, is learning all the subtleties of taste. Not so that you end up serving them, but so that you don't end up upsetting them, and can find ways to work together to have surprise and challenge and enjoyment and reward and all of that stuff, all mixed together in unequal and shifting amounts. Anyway, take care.
If everything goes to plan, then tomorrow we'll be playing Star Trek Adventures. And that will be part B of episode 1, which instinct is compelling me to entitle Questions of Duty. And I've already put this on part A, which was released earlier today. Questions of Duty. While I still consider this to be a tentative title, subject to change, it is guiding. It grew from the preparation I did before play, and is now going to serve as a guiding principle or as a theme for how I run the non-player characters and how I portray the atmosphere aboard the Avicenna as we go forward. And we may end up, because of how things actually play and the sorts of events that interactions between the players and myself cause, I may want to change this title to more adequately express or more artistically express what the episode turned out to actually be about. But for now, Questions of Duty is enough. It's properly ambiguous from my perspective and highlights a key point of play right from the very beginning. So there's that. When session 1 ended, the players had created for themselves, with a little help, the enmity of the ambassador assigned to deal with them, Ambassador Coter. And he seemed to be manipulating events to bring that about, which is kind of curious. And that's something that may be explored later on in the episode, or not, depending on how important the players may think he is, I guess. So there's that. From my perspective, why was he angling to cause dysfunction or a breakdown in relations, even though Troyes requested Federation aid? Well, simply to make it more difficult for the crew of the Avicenna, the representatives of the Federation, to identify that maybe it was dissidents on Troyes which were responsible, right? And of course, they are relying on the foul temper and bad disposition of the Elasians to further obfuscate the political unrest which still exists in the system. They're just hoping that the Avicenna will try to complete its task of finding Elon's duty and then get out of there. However, acting Captain Tillich, Commander Tillich, is no slouch in the arena of diplomacy himself. So, things that I need to think about to prepare myself for the coming episode are different stalling tactics that an ambassador like Kotri could throw up to prevent things like beaming down to the surface, talking to other government officials, roadblocks that he can put up in communication, both for Troyes and for Elas. Also, just before we finished the session, it was revealed that there was an interstellar warp-capable ship moving somewhere in the system, closer to the sun. And this is suspicious activity. It stands out as not being a local vessel. So who is it? Is it the Klingons? Maybe investigation will go in that route. So I'll need to be prepared for what they may choose to do information spends on. What are details about that ship? Where is it? What is what is space like there? Meanwhile, there's also the search factor. I'll need to make that interesting. It's going to be represented as an extended task. And I could do it as a normal, simple extended task, but I'm thinking that it's time to bring in the gated task. They're going to have to do specific things in order in order to complete their task of A, finding the ship, or B, ruling out that the ship is there to be found. It's destroyed or what have you. And of course, there is a timeline, right? The guilty party, the Orion pirates, they are not simply going to be hanging out waiting to be discovered. They are currently moving the prize because, of course, this is a vessel. There are things that they can do with it. It's not without its value. But at a certain point, the people on board become a liability rather than an asset. And if it's a question of slowing down the Avicenna by bringing about destruction or devastation to Elon's duty, of course they're going to do that to cover their getaway, that kind of stuff. So I need to be prepared for describing the ships, describing the interesting location for the ships, and be prepared for the players to spend threat by understanding how things are in the system. We've already established through play that the Federation's star maps of the solar system are not as detailed as they should be. And so possibly we'll see someone on board the Avicenna decide to take on the role of completing better maps. But while they're in the progress of doing that, they're going to have to be navigating in the system. So there may be scenes in their future where navigation is presented at a higher difficulty, and they'll have to leverage their abilities to mitigate that. I'm not going to think about how much threat I might wind up with or how I want to use it. That I want to be purely improvised and tied directly to what's going on in the scene. But by the time we play, I want to feel comfortable with describing the Orion ship and the Orions themselves. I have ideas for who they are. And we need to be prepared for some exciting stuff, like it could be possible for the Avicenna to track down the ship, to close with the ship, to do things like tractor it and board it. And so this means that physical combat between characters could be possible, or ship-to-ship combat, or at least a chase could be possible. So reading over those sections of rules are also uh, in my future. But in terms of other preparation, everything is already in motion. Right? Elas is upset, and they know who to blame. They're blaming Troyes. Troyes is upset. They're a little more sophisticated. They are, let's say, more willing to publicly blame Elas, but there would be members of their government that are suspicious that it may be dissidents on Troyes. And of course, this confusion is exactly what the Orion pirates want to cover their tracks. The pirates themselves, well, all they want is the war. And so why are they not destroying the ship now? This is their ace in the hole. It needs to be discovered in the right place at the right time in order to set off uh, what they hope to be a powder keg. So that's part of the ticking clock of the episode. If the Avicenna can beat them to that punch, then they will have gone a long way toward fulfilling their directive of preventing hostilities. But if they're the ones to uncover the destruction, and depending on whether or not they have a clear picture of what's happening on the ground on these two worlds, it could be really interesting in what directions that plays out. So this is where I'm sitting for preparation. In terms of rules, I think the group is well primed for combat. I think it'll be easier for them to get comfortable with space combat. Who knows if that will actually occur at any point? But the hand-to-hand or ranged combat isn't significantly different. I think everyone will enjoy how range works. And so hopefully I won't have to spend much time either describing it or justifying it. I think as a notion, it will be familiar to Ron, and Joseph and I have already talked about it. So it's a question of how KC feels about it. But anyway, that's usually the thing that is a little different for people. Anyway, until the next time, this could conceivably, if there's enough time to play, bring about the end of the episode, although I'm thinking that is unlikely. I imagine that they will find things to do and they'll find ways to do it, which will fill the time and we'll need a third part. But I'm trying to make this one shorter than the pilot by what? It's hard to describe. There were many, many layers of things that I wanted to introduce in the pilot about the Federation, about the crew, about the ship, about the location, about elements from their backstories. None of those things are necessary now. So all I need to think about is how to keep this the relationships between all sides in motion realistically through time. Right? What is changing? Right? If the crew of the Avicenna chooses to do this, what's happening with the other, groups that are also doing things? What's happening with them during that same amount of time? So I'm not setting things up so when the Avicenna has done this, this other thing will happen. The actions of the crew are not triggers for plot events. Right? In my head, I have a timeline of, the Orion pirates' plan, the Troyan ambassadors' plan, and the Elasian government's plan. How upset are they getting? What kind of rhetoric are they putting out? So depending on how much time the Avicenna takes, that they're maybe forced to take, if the extended task to search for Elon's duty takes long time, then we will see these two governments get angrier and angrier and angrier, and that will have spin-off effects like the pulling back of local support, or the not so gentle request for the Federation ship to leave, right? So uh, lots of interesting things can crop up. But that's it. Until next time.
Okay, I'm going to take advantage of the sudden and unexpected peace and quiet to record my thoughts about preparation, such as it will be, for the third session in episode 1, Questions of Duty. This will be part C. Questions of Duty still feels like the right filter. I don't know if it will stay the same title all the way through to the end, but it's how I want to approach, still how I want to approach the situations that the NPCs, both that we have seen and that we have not seen, how they behave and how they're thinking, how they're reacting to things. That's through that filter of duty. Whether or not this will be reflected in the crew will have an influence on how I feel about the title when we get to the end. And I don't know how many sessions it's going to be. It feels like a short episode. So maybe there'll be one more session, or maybe there'll be who knows. I'm not going to speculate on it. All right, something that has definitely changed from the beginning is that I wasn't really happy with the idea of the stolen cloaking device for the Orions, the notion of stolen cloaking device. I liked that the Orions would intermittently be detectable, partly because of their guile and their use of the system's peculiarities to hide, but also because of their ship design. And if you hearken back to Journey to Babel, which I think subconsciously informed my choice of wanting the Orions. Two things, subconsciously and then consciously and then overtly, and then I went back to check the episodes, and it's like, yeah, this all really fits, neatly. So the Trojans are green. Who else do we know that are green? Because I definitely wanted it to be outside interference. Now, we've seen in Journey to Babel that the Orions are willing to undergo such extreme surgeries that they can go and look like Andorians, totally different pigmentation and appendages and this sort of thing. So that's kind of interesting. I mean, if your focus is on trade, any kind of trade, above board or black market, then what kind of technologies are available along these lines? So this got me thinking. But it'd be pretty easy for an Orion, I think, with a little bit of surgery and a little bit of guile, to pass themselves off as a Trojan. And Trojan culture seems to be sophisticated, and it seems to be complicated. And so there would be those in its upper echelons that go for luxuries, especially forbidden luxuries, especially for off-world rare things. And who else can appeal to that better than some kind of, Orion merchant? Now, I really like the idea of them sowing chaos in this backwater world away from the Federation, but trying to join the Federation, but with Klingon interest and this incredibly valuable resource of dilithium. I mean, everything is there for profiteers to move in and start messing with things, to start causing more chaos and more disruption. So I find all of that really fits. So I can find all of the tools that I need just from the Elan of Troyes episode and the Journey to Babel episode. And then there's the cloaking device. How do I want them to get around? Is guile enough? Well, then I started thinking about Who are their markets going to be, right? Of course, there are going to be groups inside the Federation and outside the Federation and inside the Klingon Empire and outside the Klingon Empire that uh, will be markets for the dilithium crystals and other groups out there that may also draw upon this technology. And the Orions are free to move about and do what they want. So we really are talking about strong motivation. So what if there is some kind of connection to the Klingons? Right? I don't want the Klingons to be involved. I'm willing, through large expenditures of threat or whatever, should this become a mystery, should this become a political thriller, should the crew of the Avicenna get involved with the Troyan government, much more than the Alasian government, the Troyan government, and dig down. I think it would be interesting to have as some kind of twist, some kind of raising of the stakes, some kind of introduction of more threat, there to be some kind of Klingon emissary somewhere in the woodwork. That's kind of interesting. Our arrested ambassador Kotri, for example, may have a Klingon ambassador, relaxing at his estate, kind of thing. So, who knows? Possibilities, not really considerations. So, what if there is the possibility that the Orions, from time to time, conduct trade with various captains of the Klingon Empire? Maybe they've been exposed to some of the secrets of how the cloaking technology works, and that's enough. So they don't have a cloaking device, but what they do have is a device which allows this intermittent ability to evade detection, coupled with their guile. So in other words, nothing has changed looking backward about what they have been able to accomplish. The explanation of what allows it, I want to change. It's not, well, it is a jury-rigged device. We can see their dedication to profit, their dedication to disruption in the motivations portrayed in Journey to Babel. So, this makes them less a profiteering and privateering band and more of the tools of a more powerful merchant in the background. And that appeals to me too. That also can inform decisions that get made. So that one little detail, like the justification for how the Orions are able to, from time to time, evade detection, how they've been able to move through parts of the system with their precious cargo of the captured ship, that makes me feel more confident about what the players may discover. I feel like the cloaking device is technology that would be held onto far more tightly by the tenuous alliance between the Romulans and the Klingons than that too hasty decision represents. But if anybody is going to have some aspect of cloaking technology, I feel really comfortable with that being the Orions. So that's something that's changed. In the previous episode, we had like an altercation in the mess hall with Yang and someone who's kind of jealous of Yang's opportunities and connections. That was kind of interesting. And of course, the elephant in the room is Korsakov and the alien artifact. This episode may be way too busy to introduce something like that, like a conversation about it. But in the back of my mind, I feel like before too much time passes, we really need to have a conversation between Mbuto and Korsakov about the artifact. Yes, the captain knows about it. Yes, no harm so far has come to the crew, but it does seem like something that these professionals, these individuals, and these people who share their lives aboard this vessel and risk their lives as a part of their service, as their duty, It does seem like something that has to be talked about. So again, that will rely on instinct. What is the right time to broach this conversation? Is it something that will be an interruption of the action of play, or is it something that will occur in a lull in play? I don't know. Will it occur in Part C, or will the episode come to an end with Part C? I don't know. I don't need to know. But things are moving. We've discovered wreckage, and so what they're going to do with this wreckage and the realization that there's not enough mass there to represent the whole ship, Elan's duty. So I'm assuming that they will investigate, but they may not. They may simply go to the other zones on their list and check to see what's there. But the timeline has been moving forward, and they've been moving very, very quickly. They've been accomplishing their tasks very quickly. They've been coordinating with everyone, and they have been transparent with the Trojans about their timeline. But the Alasians have been pretty much sitting in the dark, and the only one talking to them, if anyone is talking to them, from the Federation perspective, is the Trojans. So that's a very long time for them to be waiting for some kind of response. So it's time for the Alasians to get in on the action. It's time for the Trojans to begin, throwing more of their weight around the ones that feel like Ambassador Kotri. It's time for the ones that feel like Ambassador Achille to need to demonstrate that they have control, that they have authority. So it means that the crew of the Avicenna is suddenly going to be the focal point of much attention on the political level, which means that this is an opportunity for the Orions to interfere and cause trouble. So that's my preparation for Part C, seeing how things are understood by the players, which parts they feel they can and should act upon, how much time that's going to take, and how much time that allows for the NPC factions, let's say, to get things done. And then we'll have either a big ball of confusion to the benefit of the Orions, or we will have some kind of aha moment or realization or research leading to conclusion, which enables the Avicenna to do something beneficial for these people. But anyway, that's what I've got so far, and rather than risk a sudden dog explosion, this will be the end of this entry. All right, this is one of many attempts to record my preparation thoughts before we play. And now it's actually the day that we're going to play, and it's just like 4 hours from now. Every single previous iteration of this video has been interrupted by one thing or another. And the first one was made on, Saturday in the car. And it, ruined by noise. So anyway, what do I want to say in this segment? Well, the last installment, the last session ended with the threat of combat and with the Orions locking weapons, spoilers, the Orions locking weapons on the Trojan vessel. We've got the Trojan Starliner, very fragile, multi-purpose craft. We've got an Alasian Starliner, which is more suited for war, but certainly not ready to stand up to a really starfaring civilization, right? Which had been trying to attack the Trojan vessel. The Avicenna interposed herself and made it impossible for the Alasians to attack the Trojans. We have to wonder, why do they want to attack them in the first place? But into this mix comes the Orion. The Avicenna, as we focused a lot on the preparations that go into making the Avicenna ready for this kind of encounter, and ready they are. So they are not surprised. It's not an ambush. It's not, not a counting coup kind of situation. The Orions come in and are detected, and the crew of the Avicenna will have opportunities to do whatever it is that they think to do. I don't know if this will go to just weapons fire to see what happens, or if decisions will actually be rooted more in character. Um, the we're on the hump where we end up not quite making it into role play through the mechanics, but we're high enough on that hill to be able to see where role play lives, and resorting to optimism, we can believe that it will be reached. So, because I don't have enough players, the group doesn't have enough players, and never did have enough players to occupy all the really interesting bridge positions. We end up with main characters and supporting characters tied together, and this is a lot for people to think about. And there are a lot of really interesting rules from the tactical standpoint and from the dramatic standpoint. Right? Star Trek Adventures really covers all the bases, and when you have a group of people who are interested in the characters, who are interested in the setting, who are trying to role play, then the mechanics really support that. They're very present, they're very obvious, but they are providing one of the guiding lights that are taking you into a moment that could have been in an episode. It's really kind of interesting how it's not an experience of just using rules. It's not an experience of players deciding to act within certain genre constraints. Right? It is a harmonious blend of these things that makes it feel, when it all works, like you just lived through an episode of Star Trek. It's kind of cool. This is one of the reasons why I persist in playing the game, despite my strong feelings about how the information in the core book is organized and presented. So I don't have, and never did have, enough players in this group to have a full-on fight with all the bells and whistles moving. And plus, we're just not ready for that in terms of system comprehension. We're nowhere near system mastery. So this particular group has its pace, and we're not ready for huge knockdown, drag out brawl. We are ready for a dramatic approach to combat. We can look at giving orders. We can look at the effect of things, and it will be a challenge for me to lift things up onto the descriptive level rather than my instinct, which is to reveal, to show, to facilitate, to teach the underlying systems so that they can take that information and go. If this scene can be presented as exciting, if we can focus on Ensign Yang at the helm, if we can focus on Lieutenant Korsakov at the con, and if we can tie Ensign Yang together with an interesting supporting character, and if we can do the same for Korsakov, perhaps Korsakov and Mondragon at tactical, then we can involve the shields and the firing through Korsakov. And with Yang, we can deal with the maneuvering, and we can deal with ship's power. And those concepts should be enough and can reveal some of the possibilities for tactical depth, but also the possibilities for dramatic depth that these situations allow for. But I don't know if we're actually going to get to combat. The players are creative and intelligent. They may come up with some other means of preventing combat from happening. After all, it's one of their directives. They don't want combat to happen. They certainly don't want the Orion vessel to swoop in and blow the Troyans to stardust and, start some kind of war. And who knows what the Orion's actual plan is for creating the chaos that they want to benefit from. And who knows why the the crew of this Orion group, split between their two vessels with their agenda. Who knows why they're willing to lay their lives on the line, similar to Journey to Babel, uh, for these outcomes, right? What is it that motivates them? I hope that will be an interesting question also. I hope that will inform play. Like, why are they doing this? Why are they willing to take these risks? Why are they in this small little vessel that's pushing its engines beyond capacity so that they can fight above their weight class? So it's a real, glass cannon kind of situation. To represent this, if combat should happen, this Orion vessel, which doesn't exist in the core material. It's one I've put together myself for this purpose. It will fight as if it were scale 4, but it's actually scale 3. So it will be able to deliver a punch stronger than it can take. This will help me keep combat moving by by not having the villain have such high resistance to damage as the Avicenna, while still maintaining the actual threat. Right? So they will have a significant risk, but they also don't have to slog through a long combat with just the two of them, if that makes sense. So it's not about making it easier for them, it's about making it faster so that it can be more dramatic. If combat happens. If combat doesn't happen, then that's not something I can prepare for. It's not something I'm even trying to predict. In the background, I also have to understand that Captain Tillich has just abducted the captains of the Elasian and the Trojan vessels, and is supposed to be involved in interrogating them. And I have some options. As the scene was framed, he's going to be using diplomacy while Korsakov is on the bridge with Yang, being ready to use violence if necessary, right? Or whatever it turns out to be. So Tillich is in position to learn all of the interesting stuff that's causing suspicion in the system, which we talked about in the first and second segments of this preparation video. But I have quite a large amount of threat now, so I could turn it into a different kind of situation by spending threat. I could have it that one or more of the people that were beamed aboard are actually Orions in disguise, right? So they would be on the Trojan vessel. What were they doing just before the Avicenna showed up, right? To goad the Elasians into attack. Are they the ones responsible for blocking the signals? Are the transmissions, the news broadcasts, the communication broadcasts about the search, all this stuff? Are they the ones that are responsible for cutting Elas off from all of that information? So that's kind of interesting. I could approach it that way. Either way, as an NPC, his role is to be competent, right? And to do the sorts of things that a supporting character is not designed to do, right? The main character works in conjunction with the supporting characters. The NPCs work independently. So Captain Tillich, now that he's an NPC, is there to be competent. So obtaining information, applying some kind of diplomatic solution, dealing with medical emergencies, these sorts of things are what he's for. Now, so depending on how things actually go, like if there is combat, if it is dramatic, and if it does move quickly, if I get all the things that I hope for, then it might be interesting to spend those threat on some kind of surprise with, that the Trojans that were beamed aboard are actually Orions. And what does that mean? Or it may be that all the threat gets used in a long and dynamic combat, and Tillich discovers, why everybody's so upset and exactly what the Orions have been preying on, so that some of those solutions can be solved, probably as a coda, right, happening off stage. But either way, I have to prepare for a combat, or I have to prepare for a surprise, not combat. I have to prepare for combat because I've initiated an attack. What's going to happen as a result of that action? The Avicenna gets to go first. It gets to interrupt if it wants to, if it chooses to. So, what does that mean? I'm not going to devote any time to thinking about that. I'm not going to think about how am I going to spend threat? How am I going to make the Orion mysterious? Or I am going to try and make the Orion interesting by utilizing speed, by utilizing range changes, and by having various weapons. The Orion is armed with both phasers and disruptors. And the reason for that is, so they can blame whoever they like in order to, to spark the chaos that they need. Right? So if they have an opportunity to take on a smaller Federation ship, the Avicenna, and possibly win, well, that makes sense. They certainly can't let the Avicenna get away with the knowledge that it was them. Right? So this makes it pretty obvious what the Orion motives have to be. First, they have to escalate things to the point where there's no going back, where there's going to be hostilities and sides are not going to be interested in listening to each other, meaning at least one of these two ships has to get destroyed, the Elysians or the Trojan vessels. And then from that point, if combat can be engaged with the Avicenna, then the Orion's other ship can possibly come in or try to use its captives to their advantage in some other way. So there's lots of different ways for that to happen, none of which I need to think about in any great detail. I mean, it can be a simple execution, Orions surgically altered to appear to be Trojans, executing the royal executioner. How about that? Or it could be the faking of Federation phaser fire on the hull of Elan's Duty to breed mistrust about the Federation and have the system want to turn toward the Klingons, and vice versa. So these decisions will depend a lot on how much threat I have and how things are flowing. I don't really want this to go on to a 5th episode or a 5th session, but if it's fun, then I don't have too much of a problem with that. But this is the part that feels like the climax. The ship swoops in, there's going to be some dramatic event, combat or cleverness, and then the episode ends, is how it would work, how it would feel natural and normal for a television episode. So this is why I'm thinking that this is the end, right? So if we have enough time to play properly, and if things move along as I hope they will, then this should be the end. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what the players actually do. And what am I preparing for? I'm hoping to be able to lift things up beyond the mechanical level and closer toward the role-playing level. And fingers crossed that can happen. Okay. Until the next time.